For the evening drama 4 weeks, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
that'd be good.
Yeah, we got to go. Yes. Just the analog way.
Yeah.
Very useful.
I think I'm supposed to be here.
What number?
I'm one of the sisters.
Oh, okay.
That's my girl. That's all right. I'll stay here. I think they can. That's not booked. That's what that's it.
So my name is Bill Mousoulis, and I'm one of the co-organisers with Chris Bluescree of this series of screenings called Unknown Pleasures, which basically is devoted to under-recognised filmmakers or films. Richard's not an under-recognised filmmaker, but just really good to screen this first film that he did, and also that kind of more serious work around his mother. So thanks for coming. Thanks to the venue for allowing us to keep doing these screenings. Also thanks to the traditional owners of this land for allowing us to live, work and play on this country after 250 years of abuse against them. So my respects to the Wurundjeri elders and my love and solidarity with all Indigenous people. And because it's a tight slot and we just kind of have no intros from Richard or from Digby Houghton, who's the programmer here for this session. So we're going to go straight into the films, and then, yeah, we'll have the Q&A at the end with the two of them. So thanks.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
I thought I might start by addressing the elephant in the room, which seems to be your mother. She seems to run through Strikebound, Evictions, this documentary, probably numerous other projects. I was wondering if you considered yourself an auteur, would Wendy be part of that auteurship maybe?
Yes, I was thinking of calling the program all about my mother rather than Meet the Lowensteins, but it's not Meet the Lowensteins who are actually here. It's really Meet the Lowensteins in the past and the movie. And initially I just wanted to give a shout out to my sister Martie, who's down the front there when you saw who's in great persistence persecuted me through the tail end of COVID to actually put all that together with the benefit of the fellowship, was it? Folk and National Library Fellowship, who made it all possible. So that was like, I think it was $8,000, and and as you see at the very end, we're kind of trying to raise the funding for a feature-length version, which hopefully what gets crowdfund will be added to by Screen Australia and Film Victoria. But it's a weird, probably for all Peter, Martie and myself, and maybe even Sienna who's here, it's a weird kind of, almost like a therapy session, seeing all that. because she was an extremely formidable woman who was a handful, but also incredibly inspiring to a lot of people. We still meet some of her students from Richmond Girls High and McRobs, who she used to teach, who just sort of come up to us and go, "Your mother changed my life. You know, she told me I could be more than just a housewife," or she told me, you know, it's just endless that people over our lives have just sort of said, "Your mother was a great inspiration." So we're sort of trying to live up to her very high standard.
I think you do a good job. Yeah, and I was also interested in the pipelines running from Evictions into Strikebound in terms of that kind of docudrama, but then also in Evictions it deals with effectively a poverty-stricken inner city. It's kind of hard to imagine as someone who was born in 1996 in the inner city, but Dogs in Space also kind of perhaps deals with that notion of perhaps contested land or private property versus squatting, and see these kind of currents running through your 80s films as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's sort of weird seeing that, is that Dogs in Space was written in a very similar way with the theme of oral history. It's like, I was making the film 5 years after all this sort of activities are in the film, and most of it around cheap rental houses and shared houses. And I probably wasn't all that conscious at the time of the sort of lineage that why I was getting to that. But I did sit in cafes with all the old punks, tape recording their stories, then putting it together in a script, and it does fit into the theme of the kind of social documentary type of drama. And it's starting from about probably that trip around Australia, my mum had very bad audio technical skills, and so it became quite obvious that my job was going to have to be, twiddling the knobs on the Akai tape recorder. And the next sort of, until I got to film school, that, whenever she'd go off on a field trip, she'd take me and I'd twiddle the knobs and try to get her recording technique. So my theory is that some of that, starting at whatever age it was, 11, 12, some of that must have actually sunk through to my subconscious, and then I just kept going in that field.
You didn't have the benefit of AI at the time.
No. Yeah.
But I was curious with the documentary at the end. There seems to be these three channels, at least how I interpret it, between Verna, your father, and Wendy at this beginning, and then the folk movement, and then your trip around Australia.
Yeah.
Do you plan to sort of tell it in three different narratives, or will it interweave? Or is that you can't reveal?
I think I can reveal. I think what we are trying to focus on is the lady who has seen a lot in Don't Be Too Polite. On top of my mother is Shirley Andrews, who was quite a dynamic and pioneering woman as a historian as well as in her career, and I wanted to do it as a double portrait of. They both have very similar journeys, yet actually very different as well, through the Communist Party and then getting disillusioned with the Communist Party and sort of falling into the folk movement, which came out of the Communist Party. But they very soon left the politics behind, even though it was there, it was there in their lives. But, well, let's say the communist part of the politics. As everyone started getting disillusioned with Russia and China and all that. So I find that fascinating, that the actual folk movement, both in dance and in oral history and in song, and Mum was obviously focused on the oral history part, and others like Norm O'Connor were focused on more the song part, and then Shirley was focused on the dance part. And so I did find that fascinating, that it all came from this kind of left-wing nationalistic movement after the Second World War. and even even the attraction to my father, who obviously there's definite attraction there, but also Mum was very proud that he was a refugee from Nazi Germany, and it kind of gave her, let's say, she felt sometimes that maybe that had been her experience too. She used it as
Badge of honour.
what was it? Yeah, badge of honour, definitely, and a sort of surrogate Jewishness, which she's a Scottish Presbyterian, but she sort of I can still remember her saying, I married a refugee from Nazi Germany. Of course, I'm bloody Jewish, so, things like that.
It's interesting, particularly going back to when we last chatted at the Strikebound screening with that film depicting the Wonthaggi miners' strike in the 30s, and then you've got Evictions also in that era. But it's quite. I just wondered if you could speak about Noel Cunningham as a figure that I could quite immediately recognise. I wondered if there was a connection, as was the case with Strikebound, with the New Theatre Group with John Flowson. Was there perhaps a connection to Noel? Or?
Absolutely. Well, Noel was a great family friend, wasn't he? I mean, we knew him quite well, and he was just the loveliest man. And I sort of I was in sort of a little bit of trouble at film school because I sort of goofed off the first 2 years and actually hadn't almost failed. And my mum was kept saying, they told me I was gonna fail second year. And Mum said, you really should look at this story, and Noel Cunningham, listen to his audio, and I was kind of saying, how am I going to turn this around? And so I did. I listened to his audio recordings, and Tom Hills who's also in there, was a great friend of the family, and in fact I always shared my birthday with him, and that it was a very familiar thing for me to sit them in a room and actually film them, And I think I took them to the house that we actually smashed up in the film, and I just thought it was kind of interesting. Instead of having two kind of working class people talking, like Tom Hills was a wharfie, and Noel Cunningham, who, in his own words, came from a fairly middle-class background, I thought the contrast in their stories of the same thing was fascinating. And so normally I would have interviewed them separately, but I decided to put them in the place where we actually was very similar to the houses they were talking about, and get their contrasting views of the same thing. But yeah, it was, as you can sort of see, it was a family affair, and we not I don't know about holidays, but we spent a lot of time with both Noel Cunningham and Martie might be able to say. Was he? Was he a friend of the...
His son, Mick Cunningham, was in the folk movement.
Yeah.
So we knew Mick.
Teacher at RMIT,
right,
I think.
yeah.
Jeff the son became a teacher at RMIT, I think.
Yes. Mick Cunningham, that's right. He was a folk singer, I think, wasn't he? Yeah. And Mum always loved his paintings. Never could afford them, I don't think.
I think she had some.
Did she?
Do you want to open it to the audience, Bill?
Sure. People can speak up, or maybe I can pass the mic around. Anyone got a question?
We've silenced them.
Okay.
Kevin?
Down the front.
Thanks, Bill. Richard, it's an astonishing, don't be too polite, girls, access to all the music, etc. Is that widely available? Can we access that? What sort of archive has your mother left of everything that we see in the second film?
Well, she was very proud of her collection of Australian folk music records, and I'm not sure, Martie could speak to that maybe? But
Yeah,
Do you want to come up and join?
yeah, come on.
Yeah, come on, don't be
Take a
shy.
seat. You're all right there?
All the archives are in the National Library, including a huge number of the folk festivals were all recorded. And I was amazed when I got up there, because I only went up to look at mum's stuff, but an awful lot of that folk movement, you know, when they collected the original songs that we know, but no one sings much anymore, but they were in the 70s, the Bushwhackers and the Cobbers were singing, they're all in the National Library. They're not easy to find because they're not online, but they are there. And you can find most of that music. Well, some of it we found online, internet.
Yeah.
Declan Athley. Yep.
But we did before we handed over Mum's record collection to the National Library, we did sort of digitise a lot of the ones we liked, and also the ones I thought I would be using down the track. So
And how many hundreds of hours of home movies have you got?
I don't know, not many home movies because we couldn't afford video or Super 8, but there's hundreds of hours of audio recordings.
About
That's
1,200 hours.
Yeah, 1,200 hours, yeah. So, and that's all in the National Library. But one of the reasons I sort of also want to use that material in a film such as a feature-length film such as Don't Be Too Polite is that it does just sit there in the National Library, and no one really accesses it except the occasional research student. And now with sort of current technology, and you can clean up those noisy recordings and make them sound really quite professional, and just an opportunity to use those archives into something that's accessible, that's easily viewed and entertaining and all that is I thought it's a great shame just to let that archive sort of just gather dust there. And Martie could tell you, a lot of the recordings are only digitised because she has been haranguing the National Library. She's annoying them.
I've been quietly persistent since 2011 when I found out that Mum's recordings were in reel-to-reel tape in the National Library in cold storage, not on the catalogue. And now they're starting to, they were digitised after about 10 years of annoying and going visiting them, and now they're starting to be online. And people are starting to say, yes, they're using them. So it's really gratifying. It's more that they didn't know what to do with oral history, and a lot of libraries don't really know what to do with oral history. It's hard to access because if Mum records, you know, Jack Smith, no one's going to search for Jack Smith. So they don't know what it's about unless someone writes a summary.
So, I mean, there's a story just read that happened the other day is that I was filming at a studio in Richmond, and the owner of the studio said, I think my granddad was recorded by your mother because he appears in her book, Weevils in the Flower. And so I said, we may be able to have that, you know, that original recording. And Martie found it, sent it to me within 24 hours, and then I was playing it to the actual, you know, his long past grandfather who actually identified the body of Squizzy Taylor back in the day. And he was like, him and the entire family apparently were in tears listening to their grandfather, who normally just wouldn't be recorded. He was just a policeman that Mum found that had an amazing life but would have just passed away without any record. And now that it's all digitised, it's like, you know, those things are possible. So, and all, you know, it goes right through from the 69 recordings you see here to then the Weevils in the Flower, and then she did one on the immigrants and the waterside workers, and it's all sort of, and then I think she went to Pilbara too.
She did the Robe River dispute that was in when awards got broken down to contracts in the northwest mining, and then she did a lot of, in the 1990s, changes to work from regular awards, working awards, to contracts and part-time work, yeah.
And then we found
Unstoppable.
and then Martie found the relatives of those in the First Nations people she recorded, and they're kind of they're still referring to her work in their tours of the area. Who was the?
Oh yeah, that was Bart Pilgrim. His father was in Brand New Day, the Pilgrim Brothers, and he does tours and he sings the songs that Mum recorded. He said without those, no one would have recorded those songs. Those songs would have been lost. So she did start really early. 69 tape recorders were quite rudimentary when you think about it.
There you go. Any other questions? There's someone at the back there.
I don't know if you want to pass that back. Who wants it back?
Hi.
Hi.
How did so much, exposure growing up to both storytelling and music shape your relationship to both of those things, respectively?
Well, I can answer to the music. The music obviously had a big effect because I got into the music video business, which sort of initially I was a sort of budding photographer, then turned filmmaker, but we always had that type of music in the house, along with Martie's pop records, but it was there was a lot in amongst her collection. There was a hell of a lot of very atmospheric and very filmic folk music, like Declan Affley, who was also a great friend of the family. And so I think that connection with music, even though I couldn't play, but my brother and sister sing in choirs, and I definitely couldn't sing. And so it's sort of, but I feel very, the music soundtrack of all the films I make is incredibly important, and when I usually send composers crazy because I say I can find better things than, it's like it's very important to me, and making the images work well with the music. As far as storytelling, I don't know. We exaggerate a lot.
Yeah, I can't think that much about the storytelling, but the music was transformative to me. From an original Pete Seeger concert where everyone sung along, my other brother, Peter, and I, we basically sing, but we're not performing singing, we're singing along with other people in choirs, and I still teach community singing, so that folk music's really, really important to me, the fact that people do it together, and it's a very sort of cooperative, peaceful activity. Better than football.
And there was
Sorry.
and there was these monthly sing-about things we'd get taken to as kids, like where the folk music clubs would get together outside of the festivals, where I was probably started about 6 or 7, but I would always be falling asleep as the folk singers were singing or the bush dances were happening. I was on the back there where they would sell Australian tradition and falling asleep. But something must have seeped through.
What about cinema, Richard? What was your mum and dad taking you to see as children?
I think the only mums I've done until she got a television, which wasn't until I left home, because she was a great believer in television was the opiate of the masses. But at that point, she was very proudly, she didn't like anything that was nasty. And so it was pretty much Marx Brothers films were her favourite.
But what about Dad?
But Dad was a total other kettle of fish. He would be totally addicted to European cinema and German cinema, and so I was the sort of at age of 11 and 12, the one he could take to his Goethe Institute or whatever. So probably at an age way too young for me, I had to sit through every Fassbinder, Rainer Werner Fassbinder film at like 12 and 13, which really, and every Pasolini film. And I sort of I think, is there a theme going on here? There's a lot of period costume and a lot of sex going on in these films.
And you
But,
became a film director anyway.
Sorry?
You became a film director
I
anyway.
became a film director, yes. But it's and looking at the student film and Strikebound, and I liked period costumes, so it was it was. But Dad's I got to say, Dad's filmic taste was excellent. He was, we'd go. I think we saw the Grand Illusion, Renoir's Grand Illusion, about 3 or 4 times, and he loved those
Black and white ones.
the films of he actually took me, without me even knowing anything about Kurosawa, he took me to the first screening of The Seven Samurai in the Melbourne. It was the Melbourne University Union Theatre, and it was the cinema was run by a friend of his from the Communist Party, and no one could see those films. There was no SBS or whatever, so we got addicted with Seven Samurai, and then we saw every Mifune film and everything we could. So it was really, and we come home and Mum would say, how was the movie, and I would start telling it blow by blow, then this happened and this, and she'd just get bored in about 2 minutes and say, I just wanted good or bad, I didn't want the entire bloody movie. And then she'd say, it sounds horrific, all those swords and bloodletting and things like that. But yeah, she loved the Marx Brothers though.
Just one more question from the audience, if anyone wants to grab it. No?
Digby, do you want to say anything? If you've got a question.
Yeah, just conscious that we're living in an era where history repeats itself, and a lot of the themes in these films continue to occur. State government has decided to relocate and evict a lot of public housing tenants. Just wondering, perhaps, and then Evictions itself is dealing with the 30s and the depression and the lack of the dole and the lack of a public housing body. I'm just wondering where you position yourself within all this kind of politics. I'm aware that's a big question as well. But.
Well, we obviously were brought up being very aware of social issues and being sort of sometimes dragged, but then once to demonstrations, but once we got the hang of it, we'd be dragging them, and every May Day march we were there. We were demonstrating for Palestine back in the early 70s, and Mum was a great believer in sort of all of the social issues, and very humanist in all her philosophies, and so was Dad. He was one of the kinder transport kids who escaped Nazi Germany. His parents luckily did survive and got out in time. But he was very profoundly affected by all that. And he didn't really talk about it much, did he? So there was some horrific things that he didn't talk about. But it gave us a very strong grounding in human values, and also, having empathy for people of all social stratas and all income streams. It's like she was always bringing in sort of hitchhikers and people she'd met at camping grounds, and I think she even sold a house that she had in Northcote at a very low rate because she'd met this sort of working class couple at the Richmond Community Centre, and she gave away a house that was worth 5 times as much to them for 20,000 or something. I'm still scarred from that.
I've just got one thing to say.
Yeah,
at the
sorry,
end.
yeah.
No, just one thing to say at the end, because we are finishing up, aren't we?
I think so.
I invited someone from where I live to see Evictions today, and he said to me, I saw it 30 years ago, and that's why I have been about rent control and fighting for housing and renting ever since. And I thought, that's amazing.
Yeah. Totally.
And I've got to say, that's not me, that's Wendy Lowenstein, really. I was I did what I could, but that's also, I got to admit, for, full transparency, there is some judicious editing in that film I did just last week, because some of the lines of dialogue, mainly from my own uncle who's the person asleep in the train, they're a little bit overacted. Let's just leave it at that. He was in new theatre, but let's just say subtlety wasn't his forte.
Thank you, Richard and Martie and Digby, for running the show. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
It's hard to believe my student film would have such a turnout.